The sky had hung a leaden curtain over Willow Creek all day, but by late afternoon the downpour intensified into a relentless drumming against rooftops and gutters. Jen and Mark Lawson huddled inside their cozy living room, watching through steamed-up windows as surging currents turned the familiar gentle creek behind their home into a churning vein of muddy water. Their two children, 10-year-old Mia and 8-year-old Lucas, pressed rubber-booted feet against the bay window, fascinated by the torrent that lapped at the edge of the backyard fence. By 5:23 p.m., the backyard's flower beds were submerged. Tulips and marigolds bobbed like tiny life rafts amidst the swirling eddies. The Lawsons exchanged anxious glances as the creek, swollen by upstream rain, crested its banks and spilled onto the lawn. Mark's brow furrowed as he checked his phone. Flash flood warnings for the county. He set his mug of cocoa on the coffee table, the ceramic rattling with each gush of water hitting the siding. Within minutes, the backyard transformed into a mini river. The koi pond's protective netting strained against the force of the water, sending frightened fish darting toward the waterfall feature. Lucas cried out, "Dad, look!" as a wooden planter vanished downstream. Jen's heart pounded. The creek had never been so wild. She wrapped an arm around Mia, whose wide eyes mirrored growing alarm. As the water rose toward the back door, soaking the threshold, Mark lunged for his rain jacket. "We need to move upstairs, now," he said, voice tight. Jen grabbed Lucas's hand while Mia followed Mark toward the staircase. They passed through the kitchen, sidestepping a creeping pool that had already reached squishy depths above the baseboards. Outside, the roar of water drowned the radio's newsreader. "Evacuate low-lying areas immediately." On the landing, the family paused at the top of the stairs. From the open back window, the creek's swollen roar filled the frame. Fallen branches and debris raced past in a torrent too broad and furious to be natural. Lightning flashed, illuminating the far bank where a lone raccoon stood at the water's edge, its masked face turned thoughtfully toward the Lawson home. In that electric moment, the Lawsons felt both the raw power of the flood and the uncanny intelligence in the eyes of the creature that would soon become their unlikely savior. Water seeped beneath the family room door by 5:35 p.m., carrying with it leaves and twigs churned from the creek's wrath. Mark wedged a sofa cushion against the threshold in a futile attempt to stem the tide, but within seconds the cushion floated away and cold brown water rushed in to lap at Jen's ankles. She yanked off her slippers and clutched Mia to her hip as the water rose above her calves. Lucas shrieked when it swirled around his knees, the current tugging at his pant legs. Mark knelt beside the TV stand, unplugging cables and lifting the family photos onto higher shelves. Each thunderous clap of the storm seemed to quicken the current's surge, the bay window distorted with water running down the glass like quicksilver veins. In the kitchen, water sluiced over tiled floors, swirling past the island and pooling beneath the refrigerator. Jen scooped up a stack of important papers from the counter, bills, family photos, Lucas's school drawings, and pressed them to her chest. She looked to Mark, whose face bore the strain of adrenaline and fear. "We can't stay down here," he said, voice tight. "The current will breach the front door next." Mark turned to clear the hallway, tossing clothes and baskets onto the top of the sofa. Mia clung to Jen's neck, voice trembling. "Mommy, I'm scared." Jen kissed the top of her daughter's head, her own heart in her throat. "We're together," she whispered. "We'll be okay." Above them, the stairs beckoned like an escape route. Each step splashed in cold water as Mark led the way, Lucas gripping the banister for support. With each ascent, the sound of the flood's roar receded behind them, replaced by the echo of their own wet footprints. At the top landing, they found a ring of dry carpet and a single window overlooking the submerged backyard. A dark expanse of swirling water streaked with branches, the fence half submerged, the koi pond now emptied of its fish by the current's force. Trapped on the second floor, with power flickering and the winds battering the house, the Lawsons huddled in a tight circle. Mia's small sobs mingled with Lucas's shaky breath. Mark fetched blankets from the linen closet, wrapping his family in their warmth. Jen switched on her phone's flashlight, its narrow beam dancing on the soggy walls. Lightning flashed again, revealing the raccoon, Rocky, perched on a deck post, watching with luminous eyes. His fur stood on end in the lashing rain. Jen swallowed hard as she met his gaze. There was something in those watchful eyes, a promise of guidance through the chaos. As the waterline crept toward the second-floor doorway, the family realized they were truly stranded. No road out, no help in sight, and rising floodwaters sealing their fate. But in the storm's heart, beneath the racing clouds and the house's trembling bones, a single glimmer of hope remained. Rocky's steady silhouette, waiting to show them a way to safety. Rocky's keen eyes narrowed as he clung to the drenched railing of the Lawsons' back deck, rain plastering his ringed fur to his body. From this vantage, he saw the floodwaters press against the windows below, surging higher with every thunderclap. Raising a paw, he tapped lightly on the sliding glass door, claws scraping the frame in a staccato rhythm that cut through the storm's roar. Inside, the Lawsons, huddled on the landing, froze at the unexpected noise. Mark pressed his ear to the glass, eyes widening as he saw Rocky's frantic gesture. With a desperate chirrup, Rocky leapt back into the torrent, splashing onto the now submerged steps and scurrying along the side of the house to the garage door. He scratched and pounded at the wood until it creaked open an inch, then dashed inside, nose twitching at the thick scent of gasoline from stored lawn equipment. Realizing the impending risk of explosion beneath the rising waters, he raced through the darkened garage toward the front gate, where the neighbor's porch light glowed dimly. Bursting through the gate, Rocky's soaked paws left muddy prints on the sidewalk as he bounded next door to the Thompsons' house. There, he scratched urgently at the screen door, let loose a series of high-pitched squeaks, and pawed at the Thompsons' alarm keypad, miraculously managing to trigger its panic warning. Within seconds, the Thompsons' living room lights blazed on, and their car horn sounded 3 short blasts, a local signal they'd set up for emergencies. Guided by the horn's echo, Rocky darted back along the fence line to the Lawsons' front porch, where he began tugging at a length of rope looped around the railing, one end knotted around the family's porch chair for just such a crisis. The rope uncoiled and slipped down to the floodwaters, disappearing beneath the murky surface. Inside, Mark recognized the sloshing sound and grabbed the rope just as Rocky let out a final, urgent chirp. As the Thompsons appeared with flashlights and the flashing patrol car lights swept across the street, Mark hauled his family through the sliding door, wrapping his arms around Mia and Lucas. Rocky stood on the threshold, chest heaving, tail flicking in relief as the first rescuers waded through the knee-deep water, guided by the rope he had delivered. In the midst of the rising tide and raging storm, it was Rocky's unerring instinct and fearless action, scratching, squeaking, hauling rope, that transformed raw danger into a swift, life-saving rescue. Rocky padded back into the swirling floodwaters, his fur slick with rain and debris. He climbed onto the overturned garden bench where the Lawsons had once placed potted geraniums, now awash in mud and leaves. Perched there, he let out a rapid series of agitated chirps, each one sharp and urgent, echoing against the siding. Below, the first responding neighbor appeared in hip-high waders, flashlight in hand, guided by Rocky's alarm. The neighbor frowned at the bench's overturned legs and the rope trailing into the water. Rocky beckoned him forward with insistent paw taps, then leapt toward the upturned bench again, scratching and nosing at the submerged flower pots, drawing attention to the rising current rushing inches from the porch floor. Realizing the danger, the neighbor shone his light at the backside of the house where the flood had undermined the foundation. Rocky scampered along the porch beam, then stopped at the far corner and banged a series of sharp taps on the support post. His companion followed, shining the beam on the deep hole washed into the earth, an overlooked hazard that could have swallowed the porch at any moment. As the second neighbor arrived with a cordless megaphone, Rocky raced ahead through the waist-high water, leading them toward the Lawson front door, where the family had gathered in blankets. He darted between each family member, chirping to coax them outside. When the family stepped onto the flooded lawn, Rocky turned to face the street and unleashed a triumphant, echoing chip that summoned the last of the rescuers, who arrived with inflatable rafts and life vests. Amid barking rescue commands and whir of phones calling for sandbags, Rocky remained at the Lawsons' side, his chest heaving in fast, proud breaths, his eyes bright with the knowledge that his warnings and guidance had kept everyone not only safe, but aware of every hidden peril the floodwaters had wrought. The early glow of dawn bled into the storm-torn sky as the inflatable raft, tethered to shore by the rope Rocky had delivered, bobbed against the porch steps. Mark and Jen shepherded Mia and Lucas aboard, hearts pounding with a mix of relief and lingering terror. But the journey wasn't over. Beyond the porch lay the watery gauntlet to higher ground. Rocky, slipped off the raft's edge and trotted ahead through the knee-deep water, each bound placing him on slightly firmer footing. The family watched as he paused at the edge of the submerged driveway, where a carpet of slick, moss-covered stones threatened to send the rescuers tumbling. With chestnut fur plastered to his sides, Rocky turned back toward the raft in an unmistakable signal. "Follow me this way!" Mark gripped Jen's hand and guided the children down the rope-lined path, boots squelching through icy water. Rocky led them around the perilous stones, weaving through a narrow gap between the mailbox post and the swirling current. Each time Lucas wavered, Rocky paused and let out a soft chip, his bright eyes urging the boy onward. Mia clutched Jen's coat, but when Rocky flashed a look of encouragement, she straightened, trusting the Raccoon's fearless example. At the end of the driveway, Rocky darted up a gentle embankment, paws slipping on sodden grass. He looked back over his shoulder, tail high, then bounded toward a storm-drained grate where the ground rose into a slight rise. The family followed, calf-deep now in the current, and found themselves at the base of a hill punctuated by sturdy oaks. Rocky scampered up the slope, zigzagging past gnarled roots and puddles deep enough to hide the sharpest stones. Jen hoisted Lucas onto her hip, stepping where Rocky's tracks showed no sinkholes. Mark helped Mia over a fallen branch, muddy water sluicing past their knees. Every so often, Rocky would stop, press his head into Jen's leg, then turn and lead them higher, as if to say, "This way is safe." His confidence imbued them with courage, each step bringing them farther from the flood's hungry grip. When they reached the high water mark beneath the oak canopy, Rocky stood atop a moss-covered root, chest heaving, rainwater dripping from his bristling whiskers. Below, the floodwaters lapped at the slope. But here, the earth held firm. The family collapsed onto the dry ground, arms wrapped around each other, breaths ragged but unbroken. As the sun's first rays filtered through wet leaves, Rocky padded forward to inspect each face, his dark eyes reflecting shared relief. In his unspoken way, he had led them from the depths of peril to a haven of solid earth. And there, beneath the sheltering arms of ancient oaks, the Lawsons knew their tale of courage Raccoon had carried them, step by careful step, from the roaring flood to the promise of a new, safe dawn. As the Lawsons gathered their breath beneath the oak canopy, Rocky's sharp ears picked up the distant roar of rushing water downstream, another channel of the flood that barred their path to the higher road. He wasted no time. With a determined flick of his bushy tail, he plunged from the embankment into the churning current, disappearing beneath the muddy swirl. Seconds later, the rippling surface broke as Rocky's head re-emerged, eyes locked on a fallen utility pole that bridged the torrent further downstream. He paddled with dogged strokes, front paws carving through the water, back legs propelling him forward, his soaked fur weighing him down, but his resolve buoying each movement. The family watched in awe as he fought the river's pull, inching toward the log's midpoint. Once there, Rocky hauled himself halfway atop the slick wood, claws digging in for grip. With a triumphant chip, he beckoned Jen and Mark to follow. Mark waded in first, boots submerged, water swirling about his waist. Guided by Rocky's precise signals, pauses at steady handholds, then jittering chirps, Mark edged across, balancing on the slippery pole as it groaned beneath their weight. Jen followed with Mia clutched tight, each step measured. Lucas close behind, ankles lapped by the icy current. Midway, the pole shifted and the family tensed, hearts in throats. But Rocky remained steadfast, bracing himself with a low crouch and chirping encouragement. He dipped a paw into the water to steady the log, then darted ahead once the final foot touched the far bank. With a final ringing, "Chip, chip," he signaled their safe arrival. Jen set Mia down on dry grass, and Rocky turned, his fur dripping and wild in the dawn light. He then plunged back into the stream a final time, paddling upstream through the gnashing torrent to retrieve the rope the rescuers had tied to the embankment. He dragged it ashore with a few powerful pulls, leaving muddy drag marks across the bank. When Mark and Jen looped the rope around their shoulders for stability, Rocky chirped once more, his lone, echoing call of triumph, as rescue workers arrived with additional rope and stretchers. The final crossing, once a gauntlet of raging water, had been transformed into a controlled evacuation, all thanks to Rocky's daring swim, unwavering guidance, and fearless determination. In that moment, as the flood's threat receded behind them, the Lawsons understood that their guardian Raccoon had mastered the river's fury to lead them, at last, to safety. The sun had fully broken free of the storm clouds by the time the Lawsons arrived at the county emergency shelter, a converted community center surrounded by sandbags and stocked with cots, bottled water, and first aid supplies. Jen guided Mia and Lucas inside, where volunteers wrapped them in warm blankets and offered hot soup. Mark stepped forward, carrying Rocky in his arms, his soaked fur slicked flat against a small, muscular body. A hush fell over the shelter as word spread of the family's miraculous rescue. One by one, neighbors who had assisted, rappelling teams from the fire department, volunteer boat crews, even the Thompsons and Mrs. Jensen filed in, each pressing forward with a handshake, tearful gratitude, or a gentle pat for Rocky's head. The Raccoon sat calmly in Mark's arms, whiskers twitching, as volunteers snapped photos and offered him treats of roasted peanuts and apples. The county sheriff approached, uniform buttons gleaming, and knelt before Rocky. He produced a small engraved steel medallion on a sturdy leather cord, a badge reading Willow Creek Rescue, Animal Hero Award, 2025. With careful fingers, he draped it around Rocky's neck. The shelter erupted in applause, the sound echoing off cinder-block walls like a roar of joy. Mia beamed, hugging Rocky's soft body against her cheek, while Lucas marveled at the badge's tiny lettering. Volunteers lined up to share their stories. The neighbor who had tied the rope, the fireman who'd steadied Mark on the utility pole, the EMT who'd dried off the children's soaked boots, all crediting Rocky's early warning and unflagging guidance. The Lawsons exchanged awed glances. Without Rocky's instincts, their floodwater nightmare could have ended in tragedy. A local news crew arrived next, cameras rolling as Jen and Mark recounted Rocky's first scratch on the sliding door, the frantic alarm at the neighbors, and his fearless swim through the raging current. Rocky sat alert on a padded stool, ears pricked, as the reporter leaned close. "How does it feel to be a hero?" she asked. Rocky chirped, a single triumphant chip, and the reporter laughed through tears, promising a primetime segment the following evening. As afternoon faded to evening, the shelter's lights softened. Volunteers offered Rocky a small hammock sling, fashioned from an old towel, draped across a folding chair. He curled within it, badge resting against his chest, eyes half closed in contentment. Mia and Lucas sat at his feet, taking turns stroking his fur, whispering thanks that filled the quiet room. When the children grew drowsy, Mark lifted Rocky into his arms once more. "Let's get you home," he whispered. Outside, floodwaters still lapped at the center's sandbag walls, but the crisis had passed. Beneath the shelter's glow, the Lawsons stepped into the night, a single Raccoon at their side whose courage and quick thinking had saved them all. And as they walked toward the lights of home, now just a memory of rising water, they carried with them the knowledge that true heroism sometimes walks on four paws and responds to peril with a fearless heart.